Excuse me, could you tell me where the cough syrup is?
Let's do a quick role play. Imagine you're at a pharmacy and need some medicine.
And notice that I said, could you tell me where instead of where is? Because it's a tiny change that makes a surprisingly big difference.
That sentence right there is exactly what people mean when they say that English changed their life. Not because it's a dramatic movie scene, but because one small sentence can make an ordinary moment easier.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily English Class, where we make English simple, practical, and useful for real life. I'm Emily.
And I'm Leo, and we're happy you're here with us today wherever you happen to be listening from.
So, Leo, you opened today's episode with a pretty big idea when you said that English can change your life.
I did. Although I keep getting stuck on that phrase because it sounds more like something you'd see on a movie poster than something that happens in real life.
And what's wrong with a movie poster?
Nothing at all, except that people sometimes learn one word like hello and expect their entire life to transform overnight. And that's usually not how change happens.
Okay, so what would you put on the poster instead?
Honestly, I'd call it English Can Change Your Tuesday Afternoon.
That might be the worst title I've ever heard.
Maybe, but it's more honest because you learn one useful sentence, use it on an ordinary Tuesday, the pharmacist understands you, and suddenly you walk out of the shop feeling strangely happy about buying cough syrup.
Fair enough. But all those little Tuesdays eventually add up. And after enough of them, your life can look completely different.
Exactly. And that's the whole point.
Before you continue arguing, I need to ask about the sticky note on your fridge that says, ask for the small one, because I really want to know what it means.
I'll explain it later because it's connected to today's lesson.
That's incredibly annoying.
I know, but it'll make sense at the end. For now, prove your point.
Prove what exactly?
Prove that one simple phrase can actually change something.
And just to be clear, prove means showing an example that demonstrates something is true instead of simply claiming it.
All right then. Near my old apartment there was a bakery, and one morning I wanted a specific pastry behind the glass even though I had absolutely no idea what it was called.
A classic problem.
So I said, "Sorry, could you tell me what that one's called?" And after the woman told me the name, I smiled and said, "Could I have 2, please?" Then I left the bakery with 2 pastries and a strangely good mood.
Hold on and say that first sentence again.
Sorry, could you tell me what that one's called?
Hold on and say that first sentence again.
Exactly. And it's especially useful when you don't know the word for something because you're politely asking another person to explain it.
That brings us to a great word, clarify, which simply means to make something easier to understand or explain it more clearly.
So if you ask, "Could you clarify what you mean?" you're politely asking someone to explain something again because you only understood part of what they said.
And that's important because you're not saying, I don't understand you. You're saying, please help me understand. And that's a big difference.
Okay, what else did I say in the bakery?
I think you said, I'd rather take the smaller one because the larger pastry looked enormous.
Yes, and I'd rather is a really useful expression because it means, I prefer this instead, and sounds softer than simply saying, I want.
Exactly, because I want the small one can sound a little blunt, especially first thing in the morning, while I'd rather take the small one feels much friendlier.
And remember that after I'd rather, we use the base form of the verb as in I'd rather have tea or I'd rather wait outside.
I use that expression all the time when I don't want to sound too direct. For example, yo puedo usar quizás, perhaps.
By the way, for anyone who's unsure, what exactly does direct mean?
Direct simply means saying something plainly without extra softening words. So, give me the small one is direct, while I'd rather take the small one sounds softer.
This is all great, but a bakery feels pretty low stakes because nothing terrible happens if you make a mistake.
That's another useful expression, because low stakes means something safe and not very important, which is why low-stakes conversations are the perfect places to practice English.
And that's exactly why bakeries and coffee shops are wonderful places to practice. Because in the worst-case scenario, you simply walk away with the wrong pastry.
Honestly, I'd still take the wrong pastry because it's still a pastry.
Fair enough. But let's make the situation a little harder and imagine that you need to borrow a screwdriver from your neighbor because you're hanging a picture.
And just as a quick reminder, borrow means taking something for a short time and then giving it back instead of keeping it.
Okay, then how would you ask?
I'd knock on the door and say, "Hey, sorry to bother you, but could I borrow a screwdriver for about 10 minutes?
That works perfectly. And notice the phrase, sorry to bother you, because it's like putting a soft pillow before the request.
That's actually a great image because you're making the request feel softer and easier to accept.
Exactly. And by giving a reason and a short time, you're making it easier for the other person to say yes.
Otherwise, if you simply ask, "Can I borrow a screwdriver?" your neighbor might wonder why you need it, for how long, and whether you're building something terrible.
Right? Because those little extra details turn the request into a real conversation instead of a demand.
Let me try one on you. I'm your neighbor, and I've just opened the door.
I'd say, hey, sorry to bother you, but would you mind helping me for a second because I just need an extra hand holding a shelf?
That's even better, because "would you mind helping me for a second" is one of the politest small requests in English, and the words "for a second" reassure people that you won't take up their entire afternoon.
Okay, here's an even harder situation. A delivery has just arrived, but it's the wrong item and now you need to call the company.
Oh, the phone call situation, which is something many people genuinely dread, because speaking on the phone in another language can feel much more stressful than talking face-to-face.
And dread is a great word here because it means feeling worried or afraid about something that's coming and really wishing you didn't have to do it, which is exactly how I used to feel about phone calls in English.
Honestly, that was me too. And even now, I still feel a little nervous sometimes.
So imagine this. The delivery person rings your doorbell, you sign for the package, open the box, and suddenly realize they've sent you the wrong item while the delivery is still happening around you and there's noise everywhere.
You're feeling flustered, you pick up the phone, and the first thing you might say is, "Hi, I'm sorry about the noise because the delivery just arrived and I wanted to ask about an order."
But listen carefully because this is something that confuses a lot of learners. Do we say, "I'm sorry about the noise," or "I'm sorry for the noise"?
The answer depends on what comes after the phrase, because the noise is a situation. So we naturally say, "I'm sorry about the noise," whereas "sorry for" is usually used when you're apologizing for something you actually did.
Exactly. So we say, "I'm sorry for shouting," but "I'm sorry about the noise." And although it's only one tiny word, it makes your English sound much more natural.
Okay, let's go back to the phone call. Because after apologizing for the situation, you need to explain the problem by saying something like, "I think there's been a mistake with my order," or I'd like to clarify something about my delivery.
And there is our word clarify again, because learning a word is useful only when you can start using it naturally in real situations.
Then, if the person on the phone speaks too quickly and you don't understand, your safety phrases can be, "Sorry, could you say that again, please?" Or, "Could you repeat that a little more slowly?"
Honestly, those simple sentences saved me countless times, not because my English suddenly became amazing, but because I had a few phrases that I trusted and could use without panicking.
That's actually a huge lesson, because one simple phrase that you trust is usually far more useful than 5 advanced expressions that you're too nervous to say.
Speaking of trusted phrases, let's talk about a staller, which is a phrase that gives you a few extra seconds to think, such as, "Let me think for a second," "That's a good question," or, "Let me see."
Those expressions might seem small, but they're incredibly powerful because they keep the conversation moving and give your brain a moment to catch up instead of leaving an uncomfortable silence.
Exactly. Because silence is often the scary part, and once your mouth keeps moving, even if it's only with a staller, the panic starts to disappear.
That's why I always tell learners to memorize at least one staller and keep it ready like a tool in their pocket. And my personal favorite is, "Let me think for a second," because it's easy to remember, sounds natural, and buys you a few valuable seconds.
And trust me, 3 seconds can feel like a very long time in a real conversation.
Okay, here's another situation. You're sitting in a small meeting at work with 4 or 5 people. You have a question, but you're too nervous to interrupt.
In that situation, you could simply say, "Sorry, quick question. Could you go back to that last point?" Because it sounds polite and lets people know you won't take much time.
Or if you want to suggest an idea, you could say, "Could we maybe try it this way?" Because the words "could we maybe" make the suggestion softer and give other people room to disagree.
Then, if you suddenly realize that you've used the wrong word, you can simply correct yourself by swapping it and saying something like, "Sorry, let me swap that. I meant to borrow, not lend."
That's actually a very natural correction, because the real trick of sounding fluent isn't avoiding mistakes completely, but noticing them, fixing them quickly, and confidently moving forward.
That reminds me of a sentence I saw on a learner forum where someone wrote, "I did a mistake when I asked for the small one," and that's a perfect example of a common mistake.
The correct phrase is make a mistake, not do a mistake, because in English, we make mistakes, choices, plans, and decisions, but we do homework, work, and the dishes.
There's no real logic behind those combinations, so it's best to memorize them as pairs because fixing small errors like this instantly makes your English sound more natural.
Wait a minute. Your example sentence about making a mistake when asking for the small one is exactly the same thing written on your fridge.
You finally noticed, but we're still not talking about the mysterious small one just yet. Maybe. But before we get to that story, I want to mention a comment I saw on one of our videos where someone wrote, "I know the words, but I'm too afraid to speak. What should I do?"
You're impossible.
And the honest answer isn't simply, just be confident. Because confidence doesn't suddenly appear when someone tells you to have it. What really helps is having one sentence that you trust so much and have practiced so many times that you can say it without thinking.
Exactly, because you don't need 10 perfect phrases. You only need one sentence that you've repeated again and again until your mouth already knows it.
And once that first sentence comes out, the next one often follows naturally because starting the conversation is usually the hardest part. which is why I want to do our practice section right now instead of waiting until the end.
Listen carefully and repeat after us. Would you mind helping me for a second?
Sorry, could you say that again? What does that mean exactly?
Could we maybe try it this way?
Those 4 simple sentences can help you in a surprising number of real situations, especially, would you mind helping me for a second? Because it's polite, soft, short, and almost feels like a magic phrase.
And the barista knew what you meant?
Exactly. And even though to repeat sounds logical, mind always takes the ing form, so once you fix that little detail, the whole sentence immediately sounds more natural.
Okay, enough waiting. Tell us the sticky note story.
A few years ago, I was in a coffee shop in a new city and wanted a small coffee, but the menu had 7 different sizes with strange names, so I panicked and simply said, "Could I have the small one, please?" while pointing at absolutely nothing.
That's actually your whole argument, isn't it? English didn't change your entire life that morning. It simply changed one small moment.